Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Frank Verdonk. I'm the head of the unit here in EFSA dealing with biological hazards, animal health and animal welfare. And I want to really warmly welcome you this afternoon session of the webinar on the call for membership of EFSA's scientific panels and committees. And the work of experts in this scientific committee and the scientific panels is really at the center of EFSA's activities. So we are very pleased that you take the time this afternoon to listen to this webinar, and hopefully we can convince you by the end of the webinar to apply to this call. Let's go to some housekeeping rules first on the next slide. So you're automatically connected to this audio broadcast. It's only listening mode today. The event will be in English and it will be recorded, and all the recordings will be available to you via EFSA's website at the end of the event, probably in a few days. After the event, you will also receive a link for a brief survey where you will be asked to evaluate today's event and the services where you can provide the feedback. Next slide, please. So what is the target of this webinar today? Well, it's really to reach you, potential new scientific experts who are interested in joining EFSA Scientific Committee and EFSA Scientific Panels as member. In particular, if you were not yet exposed to working with EFSA, then we will try to explain you this afternoon how we will select the potential members for the scientific panels and the scientific committee, and also how we appoint them in the end. We will inform you how we in EFSA work with the scientific panels and the scientific committee, and what it means to become a panel member or a scientific committee member. Unfortunately, it's not possible to really have a live question and answers because the number of participants was too high for this. So we invited you to provide questions upfront to us, and we will try to address some of the questions today. Can we have the next slide, please? So here we can see the agenda of the webinar with 5 different topics. First one is to explain you the call for expression of interest. This will be presented to you by Julia Fodor. Then we have EFSA and its scientific committee and panels. Will be explained to you by Maria Renia. Then we have the scientific panels dealing with ad hoc scientific advice, explained by Pietro Stella. Then we have the scientific panels dealing with applications, introduced by Andrea Gennaro. And finally, the scientific committee and its working, explained by Daniela Morrici. Next slide, please. So with this, we can immediately go to our first topic, which is the call for expressions of interests. And this will be presented to you by our colleague, Julia Fodor, who is Talent Selection Officer at the Human Capital Services here in EFSA. Julia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frank. Welcome, dear participants, also from my side. My name is Julia Fodor, and I'm a Talent Selection Officer within the Human Capital Unit of EFSA. And today I'm going to provide you next with some information regarding the call for expression of interest, the selection procedure, and the related application form. So indeed, EFSA aims to renew its scientific panels and the scientific committee in 2024. Therefore, for this reason, we have launched an open call for expressions of interest aimed at scientific experts that possess relevant scientific expertise and also wish to be considered for membership of one of EFSA's 10 scientific panels or the scientific committee. The next mandates of the members will start in July 2024 and will last for 5 years until June 2029. So let's have a look at what is the timeline of the procedure for the selection and appointment of members. So the call for expression of interest is indeed open for applications starting from 1st of February until 3rd of April. The selection procedure consisting in the assessment of the suitability of candidates runs from April 2023 until February 2024 and will complete with the appointments of the members by the management board in March and the start of the new mandates in July 2024. In any case, all candidates that applied will be informed of the outcome of their application at the end of the process. Next, the procedure for the selection and appointment of members is guided by the following main criteria in line with EFSA's implementing rules. And these are a high-level scientific expertise, meeting the needs for the specific multidisciplinary expertise of the panel and the related language regime, independence and absence of conflict of interest, a broad geographical representation throughout the different panels, as well as gender balance. Let's take a look next at what are the key features of an expert profile required by EFSA. So an expert would need to have an educational background of at least a university degree in a field relevant to EFSA, at least 7 years of relevant professional experience gained after obtaining the minimum education diploma, and as well thorough knowledge of English language. Other important aspects that EFSA looks for when selecting experts is as well their active scientific contribution, experience in scientific assessment, their scientific excellence, and as well experience in reviewing scientific work in the areas of competence covered by their panel of choice. Now, let's see how these profile features are being assessed and what are the steps of the selection procedure in the next slide. Each of the following 4 steps aim basically to verify that candidates possess certain requirements. So the first step is the eligibility screening, and at this stage EFSA basically verifies that candidates meet all the general requirements such as educational background, the years of experience, active scientific production, and the knowledge of English. On the second step, candidates which are confirmed eligible are then admitted to an evaluation phase in relation to their panel of choice on the basis of the selection criteria, scientific assessment, scientific excellence, and scientific review. Candidates that reach the minimum threshold at the selection criteria evaluation are then further mapped for the evidence of multidisciplinary expertise, as well as assets needed in the relevant panel or the scientific committee. Further on, candidates which are found to possess the most relevant competencies and expertise in relation to a specific panel are requested to fill in their declaration of interest, which are then screened according to EFSA's independence policy. And finally, the EFSA Management Board takes the decision for appointing the members and also for establishing a reserve list of candidates at the end of the process. So what is a reserve list? So this is a list of candidates that successfully passed the eligibility screening and the selection criteria evaluation and who have not been appointed as members of a panel or the scientific committee. As main purpose, this list serves for future appointment needs for members of the scientific panels and can also be used for future appointment of members of EFSA working groups. It shall remain valid until the end of the terms of members appointed in line with this selection, which is 30 June 2029. So let's see on how to apply. In order to apply, all candidates are requested to fill in and submit their application online using the EFSA career site, which can be seen at the link which is visible here on the screen. Navigating to the career site and clicking on the title of the call, you will be able to view its description, which is also available in all the EU languages and contains important information regarding the key responsibilities, working conditions, compensations, as well as further details regarding the criteria and the expertise required. After clicking apply and navigating to your recruitment account, you will find the application form as displayed on the top of this slide. The application form is structured in different sections, each aiming to capture basically certain elements and level of details of your background and profile that will basically help EFSA assess your suitability to the role. As a candidate, you are required to indicate in the application form the scientific panel or committee that you wish to apply for, which best matches your areas of expertise. So it's important indeed to read carefully the call and the annex, which outlines all the panel's mandates and specific list of expertise. Some tips regarding the content of the application form. Make sure you answer all the questions in the application form and provide the related evidence. It's also important to list your education, proving that you meet the eligibility condition, as well as list all your relevant work experiences, focusing on your role and the tasks that you had. You should also make sure to indicate full details of your scientific publications and or scientific assessments. As well, in the certification section, you would need to indicate any qualifications obtained in a certain field that prove basically your competence in a certain area. And now, as a few technical tips, it's important to fill in all the mandatory fields and save each section before continuing to the next one. Ensure that you submit the application form and submit it before the deadline, which is 3rd of April. In case you submit it before, you can still access and edit it until the closing deadline. In any case, for any technical questions, you can always contact EFSA service desk that will be happy to help you. With this, I have concluded the presentation on the call and the selection procedure. And next, I would like, first of all, to thank you for providing your questions through the registration form, which we aim to address through the content of our presentations, as well as at the end of each topic of the agenda. Having said this, I would like now to provide answers to 3 of the questions received from you. So the first one is, are experts outside of the EU eligible to apply? So experts from other countries may also apply and will be considered for membership if the required level of expertise cannot be found amongst nationals of the EU member states, EU candidate countries, or of a country of the European Free Trade Association. The second question, I don't have an official English language certification, but I have a good level of English. Can I apply? So EFSA does not request a certificate for English language at the application stage. In general, the level of English may also be proven by candidates through their scientific publications, scientific contributions at international level, as well as through proven scientific communication. So candidates are encouraged to read the description of the required level of English mentioned in the call and to self-assess themselves in the application form. The last question, I submitted my interest in the last call in 2017. In addition, I have been included in the shortlist of EFSA candidates for the scientific and technical support, the various scientific and communication profiles. Do I need to create an application from scratch? So the information previously submitted in other applications remains stored in your EFSA recruitment account, and any new applications will be pre-filled with the already existing information in your profile. And this should then, of course, be further edited for the new specific call that you are applying to. So with this, I have concluded the topic on the call for expression of interest. I thank you very much for your attention, and I would like now to give the floor back to Frank.
Thank you, Julia, for your clear overview of the process, indicative timelines, and also some practical hints that are for sure useful to the participants. I also want to remind everybody that you have seen that we ask you to submit quite some information, so please do not wait until the last day of the 3rd of April, but please initiate the application a bit earlier on. With this, we can go to the second topic of today. That's EFSA and its scientific committee and panels. This will be explained to you by Maria Arena. She is scientific officer in the pesticide peer review unit. The floor is yours, Maria.
So hi everyone, and thanks Frank for the introduction. So I think we can go to the next slide. So I will give you some information on EFSA's role and the role of the scientific panels and the scientific committee. So as you may know, EFSA was established in 2002, and currently we are more than 500 staff members. We work with more than 1,500 experts. We hold something like 1,000 meetings per year. And EFSA issues something like 500 outputs per year. From its establishment up till now, EFSA has published more than 5,000 outputs. The knowledge, skills, and experience of EFSA scientific experts are the core of our work. Next slide. So I think it's always good to clarify what is EFSA remit, the EFSA remit, and so what EFSA does and what EFSA doesn't do. So EFSA provides independent scientific advice and support for EU risk managers and policymakers on food and feed safety, provides independent timely risk communication, and promotes the scientific cooperation. On the contrary, what EFSA does not do. So this is quite important to clarify. So EFSA does not develop food safety policy and legislation, does not adopt regulation, authorize marketing of products, does not enforce food safety legislation, and does not take charge of food safety and quality control. So we can say that EFSA and its scientific panel and the scientific commission, are risk assessment bodies. So EFSA evaluates risks associated with the food chain, doesn't have scientific laboratories, nor does it generate new scientific research, but it collects and analyzes existing research and data and provides scientific advice to support decision-making by risk managers. On the other side, risk managers are the European Commission, risk managers at member state level, which have also risk assessor, by the way, and the European Parliament. They are responsible for making decisions or setting legislation about food safety. In the last box, you can find some practical example of risk assessment and risk management. For example, in the past years, EFSA carried out risk assessment of certain neonicotinoids for bees. Based on the risk assessment carried out by EFSA, the risk managers decided to ban the use of certain neonicotinoids in EU. Similarly, EFSA evaluates safety of every genetically modified organisms on a case-by-case basis, and based on the EFSA evaluation, risk managers decide whether or not to authorize each genetically modified organisms. So if you go to the next slide, here you can see the overview of all the EFSA panels and the scientific committee. We work with EFSA different scientific panels. If you go to the next one, so here, we have in particular 5 panels which are responsible for providing ad hoc scientific advice and risk assessment within their specific remits. And these are the panel on animal health and welfare, biological hazard, contaminants in the food chain, plant health, and plant protection products and their residues. Other 5 panels, which are listed in the next slide, are responsible for the risk analysis of regulated products, and as part of their work, they assess applications. These panels are the panel on nutrition, novel food and food allergens, food contact materials, enzyme and processing aids, additives and products or substances used in animal feed, food additives and flavorings, genetically modified organisms. Next, please. So, other than the 10 scientific panels, we have also the scientific committee. The scientific committee works more on scientific matter of more horizontal nature. It may provide scientific strategic advice to the executive director upon request. And the scientific committee also ensures consistency in the work done by other scientific panels by providing general coordination. Next one. So let's discuss and talk a little bit about the composition and the duration of the panel and the scientific committee. So each scientific panel may include from 11 to 21 scientific experts, depending, of course, on the workload planned and the expertise that is required in each panel and the scientific committee. The scientific committee is a bit peculiar because it's composed of the chairs of the 10 scientific panels plus 6 other scientific experts. Members of the scientific committee and the scientific panel of EFSA are appointed for a 5-year term. 2 of the key features of the EFSA panels and the scientific committee, as also presented by Julia, is one of the key features is the multidisciplinarity. So being an EFSA expert or an EFSA panel members means work in a multicultural and multidisciplinary environment. So you will be part of a panel which is composed by a pool of experts having very diverse, in some cases complementary, but diverse knowledge and expertise. This is really a real example of the expertise that may be present in a panel. We may have experts with expertise in animal pathology, modeling, ecotoxicology, ecology, genotoxicity, toxicology, endocrinology. So from this, you may already understand how stimulating may be to be part of an EFSA panels. The other key feature, which is presented in the next slide, is the independence. So EFSA applies a robust set of measures and working practice to safeguard the independence of its scientific work and avoid conflicts of interest. These are all brought together and explained in the EFSA's policy on independence, which was reviewed in 2017, and the policy is implemented by the rules laid down in the decision on competing interest management. There is an unconditional restriction which is applied to the interests that are declared, and this is the current financial investment in industry and industry employment. Besides this unconditional restriction, so all the interests that are declared by experts are screened, considering if they are compatible with the task to be assigned to the experts, in particular also to the mandate that is relevant for the group and panel. And these are all listed in the decision in the annex that is you can find in the decision on competing interest management. And these are the managerial roles, membership of scientific advisory entities. So they are all listed here. If you go to the next one. So another important topic to discuss and clarify with you is the commitment. So what practical means to be part of an EFSA panel members in terms of commitment. So panel members meets from 6 to 10 times per year. So we have from 6 to 10 plenary meetings for a total of 10 to 20 meeting days. About 1/3 of the plenary meetings are done on site, so they are physically meeting, and 2/3 are just online. Of course, we are trying to be always flexible and to organize the meeting in a hybrid mode. Attending a panel meeting means also that you have to actively contribute to the meetings of the scientific panels and the scientific committee. And this, of course, requires preparatory work in terms of prior reading. It may include also drafting of some documents and reviewing documents. And we have estimated and we expect that 1 day of meetings is equal to 1 day of preparatory work. In this slide, you can also find some example of agendas of scientific panels. Next one, please. So another possible commitment if you become a panel member is the participation to working group. When a mandate is received, a working group is generally established to address the mandate, and panel members may have the possibility and the option to be part of a working group. Of course, I mean, this is just an option. It's then it's the expert who decide based on the time availability whether he or she can participate to this additional activity, so to this work, to the specific working group. Working groups may be composed of external experts, panel members, and EFSA staff, depending on the specific expertise required based on the mandate. Working groups meet with variable frequency based on work needed and mandate deadline, and the panels has then the duty to review and endorse or adopt the scientific outputs prepared by a specific working group. Next one. So, in a nutshell, why should you should apply and becoming a panel member or a member of the scientific committee? Here we try to list 7 good reasons for you to apply. Basically, you will have the possibility to directly contribute to the safety of the EU food chain. You will engage in a multidisciplinary scientific discussion. You may develop advanced risk assessment methodology. You may network with scientific peers. You may publish in the EFSA journal, which is indexed in bibliographic database as an impact factor of 3. You will have the possibility to attend high-level training on risk assessment and EFSA methodology. And of course, you can bring back new knowledge and competencies to your country and employer. Please consider that this is not an exhaustive list of good reasons for you to apply. As Julia before, I mean, we selected some of the questions that we received upon registration, and sorry if you cannot, we can't answer all of your questions. We think we have just selected few. So the first question is, are experts working in the private sector allowed to apply? So I've already presented this, but I will repeat just for the sake of clarity, also because it's an important topic. The evaluation of the declaration of interest takes into account the interest declared by the expert in relation to the mandate of the group in question. The screening criteria for each activity are transparently laid down in the annex to EFSA's decision on competing interest management. However, there is an unconditional restriction applied to persons employed by food industry or holding financial investments in food business operators. Second question, can experts apply on a personal level or does each member state forward national experts? Experts are called to apply on their personal capacity and are not proposed by member states. Third question, I would like to know your rules regarding the distribution of the panel members in terms of country affiliation and gender. As explained by Julia, candidates will be assessed against the eligibility criteria and the selection criteria, and for additional competencies that are considered an asset. The proposal for membership is then drafted, including the indication on the specific multidisciplinary expertise needed in each panel, and should also include consideration on balance of gender and geographical distribution. Thanks for your attention and on this webinar, and I give the floor back to Frank.
Thank you, Maria, for explaining EFSA's work at a high level and also to give the introduction of the different panels in the scientific committee. We understand it's a lot of information that we provide today to all the participants, but be ensured it's recorded and the recording will be online. I want to draw really the attention of one slide that Maria explained is really why to apply, because this is really there are a lot of benefits that we believe are really in participating in EFSA scientific work. They are listed here, but as Maria said, it's not an exhaustive list. If you know experts who were already in contact with EFSA or as a member of the panels of the scientific committee, please also talk to them because they can give you also more information on this. So now it's a time to go into more detailed information on the scientific panels. First, the ones dealing with ad hoc scientific advice. And this information will be provided to you by Pietro Stella. He is scientific officer in the Biological Hazards, Animal Health and Welfare Unit here in EFSA. Pietro, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Frank, and good afternoon, everyone else from my side. So indeed, I will spend a few minutes in relation to the activities of panels dealing mainly with ad hoc scientific or requests for scientific advice. So this means activities not linked to the evaluation of specific regulated products or substances. We'll talk about this later, but activities in reply to more general requests to provide scientific advice or assess risks in a particular area in the remit of EFSA. Next. So 5 of the panels are mainly involved in this type of activities. You can see them highlighted on the screen. So the panels on plant health, on plant protection products and the residues, on animal health and welfare, on biological hazards, and on chemical contaminants. Next slide. So this type of requests can be sent to EFSA essentially by 3 bodies: the European Commission, EU member states, and the European Parliament. And in addition to that, EFSA can also initiate activities in this sense. So when EFSA receives a request for a scientific mandate, that is a scientific advice, that is what we call normally mandate. This is allocated to a specific panel depending on the topic. So let's say, for example, we get a request related to avian influenza, so this would be allocated to the panel on animal health and welfare. So for the specific topic, as it was mentioned before, normally a working group is set up that usually sees participation of some panel members, but then sees participation of a number of external experts as well that have the task to draft the assessment, which then goes back to the panel that adopts in the end the assessment, which is then published on the EFSA journal and available on EFSA website, and also transmitted back to the ones that made the request to EFSA. So this to show a bit what is the cycle of requests of this type coming to EFSA. Next. As I said, all scientific documents adopted by panels are made public, generally in the form of scientific opinions. So you can see on the screen a few examples of scientific opinions published recently after adoption from these 5 different panels. In some other cases, other type of documents are produced by panels. You can see a couple of examples here as well, like statements and guidance documents on specific topics. Next. So here we look a bit more in detail to the role of the panels during the development of a risk assessment. So what are panels normally doing? So if we think at the first step when we get the request for a particular mandate, then the panel normally discusses the request, have the chance to clarify scientific aspects and clarify the questions that come within the mandate. Then the second stage is the stage of the assessment. As mentioned before, a working group is developing the assessment, submitting it to the panel, and the role here of the panel is to approve the methodology that is used in the assessment, periodically to review the draft scientific output, if needed to request clarifications from the working group during the life of the mandate until it is finalized. There are some other actors that can come into play during the assessment. So, for example, competent organizations in member states may be required to support the drafting, or some EFSA contractors may be asked to provide support, for example, in developing models, etc., etc. Then the final stage is the stage of adoption. So we talked in a way already about that. The panel at the end reviews the final scientific output produced by the working group and formally adopts this scientific output. So the final adoption of it is under the responsibility of the panel. So throughout the whole process, EFSA staff is always supporting and guiding the panels and the working groups, and is also actively contributing to the assessments. If we go to the next, there are also other type of activities that these panels may be involved in, such as, for example, contributing to the development of horizontal guidance documents, or more specific guidance documents on some sectors, ensuring the consistency of EFSA's scientific assessment approaches implemented, and occasionally also they're involved in the assessment of some applications for regulated products. So this is not the main activity of these panels. It will be explained later for other panels, but it occasionally may also happen for these panels in certain topics. Next slide. I would like now to give a couple of examples of assessments that are carried out or have been carried out by some panels, and show a bit what can be the practical impact of this work, impact on public health, on animal health, and on EU food and feed legislation. So the first example relates to a scientific opinion that was adopted by the panel on biological hazards, and published in 2017 in the area of antimicrobial resistance. This scientific opinion was quite an extensive one and was providing a number of recommendations on measures that could be taken to reduce the use of antimicrobials in food-producing animals. So there were many measures proposed for that. And in the following years, such recommendations were considered by risk managers at European level. And just as example, you can see on the right, on the top, some measures, for example, have been included in the new EU regulation on veterinary medicinal products. So, for example, limiting the use, the prophylactic use of antimicrobials in food-producing animals. Another example is the inclusion of targets for the reduction by 2030 of the use of antimicrobials in food-producing animals. That is one of the targets within the European Commission Farm to Fork strategy. And another example is the inclusion of many of the recommended areas for research that were listed in this opinion within EU-funded research projects, such as, for example, projects aiming at developing alternative for antimicrobials or aimed at improving biosecurity measures in farming to reduce the need to use antimicrobials. And this activity also highlights the tight collaboration that we have in some cases with other agencies. So, for example, this opinion was co-adopted together with the European Medicines Agency, which is also something I think quite interesting. And in other cases, we have activities that we share with agencies such as ECDC, EEA, ECHA, that are other European agencies. Next slide to show another example. This one relates to an activity of the PPR panel on plant protection products and their residues. So in 2013, the PPR panel adopted a scientific opinion related to the potential of some substances to have developmental neurotoxicity. So within this opinion, the panel recommended the development of an integrated testing strategy to identify such potential. And this then gave rise to international discussion on the topic, including with OECD, to frame a bit the aims of such possible integrated strategy. And in the following years, EFSA continued to work on this topic, and the PPR panel in 2021 adopted a new opinion proposing an integrated approach to testing and assessment of neurotoxicity potential, also tackling the use of new alternative methodologies. So, for example, the use of in vitro testing battery to minimize the use of in vivo testing methods. Other follow-up activities also included a recent workshop involving EU stakeholders such as industry, academia, EU member states, etc., to discuss the way forward in the use of such alternative methodologies. And a new project is also to be launched soon by EFSA on this topic. So this also shows another practical example of activities carried out by these panels. Next slide here, you can just find the link to agendas and minutes of plenary meetings of the panels that I mentioned before, and also the link to a description of the remit and activities of the different panels. So all proceedings of the meetings of the panels and agendas are always made public on EFSA website. Next slide. Okay, in the end, also here, we try to select a few questions among the ones that you submitted while registering for this webinar. So I will go through them, trying to answer them. So the first one is my expertise falls under the competence of different scientific panels, a how panel, biohazard panel, the scientific committee. How should I choose the panel to which apply to? So as I showed in the slide before, where you can find the link to minutes and documents related to panel meetings. And as my colleague Julia also mentioned before, you can find all the description in an annex to this call. So I would invite you to go there and have a look. It should be actually you then to assess where you think your expertise fits best and where you could better contribute to the work of the panels. Please consider you can have two choices of panels. This will be considered, giving preference to the first, and upon need, experts could also be selected if they apply to other panels. And as was explained before, there will be a reserve list in the end that will be established and will remain also valid in the future for all panels, not only for the ones you applied to. Question 2 was how do the different panels interact among them? So I mentioned before that when we get mandates are assigned to the different panels, to a specific panel dealing with that topic. There are, however, situations when topics fall in between the competence of different panels. So if they are really equally across two or more panels, then it will be the scientific committee that will deal with that. This will be explained later by a colleague of mine. In the case where the topic falls in between two or more panels, but one panel has main responsibility for the topic, then that panel will take care. But some aspects will be dealt with by other panels. So there will be a kind of a periodic exchange of information and discussion between the different panels. So for example, the activity I mentioned before in relation to antimicrobial resistance was dealt with and the opinion was adopted by the biohazard panel, but the panel was working in tight collaboration with the AHAO panel and the FIDA panel because some issues were also of their competence in some way. Question 3, how can I express the interest to be part of a reserve list in order to be selected for working groups on more specific subjects? So in the call there is no place to do so. There's no need to do so. The call, as was explained before, is for membership of the scientific panels. This is the main aim. However, as my colleague Julia explained before, there will be a reserve list that will remain valid also for future, not only in case we would need to add new members or replace members of panels, but also will be could be used to select experts for working groups. So that will be also a possibility. So I hope this gave a bit of an overview of the activities of these 5 panels. And I'll give the floor back to my colleague, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you, Pietro, for this overview of the 5 panels dealing with ad hoc scientific advice. You provided to the participants practical examples to give just a flavor of the different topics the 5 panels are working on. Of course, these topics change with every mandate that we get and are dependent mainly on the interest of the European Commission, which is providing to us around 95% of the mandates we get in this area. But links are available also to the participants to also look into more details for a specific panel of your interest to have additional information. So we hope this is also of interest to you. Let's go to the next topic, where we will present to you the work on the scientific panels dealing with applications. So that are the 5 other scientific panels. Will be explained to you by Andrea Gennaro. He is Scientific Officer in the Nutrition and Food Innovation Unit here in EFSA. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Frank, and good afternoon to all the participants. So in this part of the webinar, I will focus on the activities of the working group dealing with applications. So my goal is to try to clarify what makes a working group dealing with applications different from the others. And just to start with the elements that are not changing, those are, for example, the composition that remains the same as you indicated, ranging from 11 to 21, as well as the length of the mandate for these panels, that is also of 5 years. In these slides, you can see a compilation of all the different type of, an example of the different type of products that can be submitted to EFSA. These are products or substances that are that requires risk assessment before the authorization. And for example, the ones that are directly under the remit of EFSA are the feed additives, the food contact materials, the food improvement agents, the genetically modified organisms, the health claims, the infant formula, and the food allergens and nutrient sources, the traditional and the novel foods, and finally the contamination substances. What concretely is an application? Because probably this is the question we need to answer. It's a series of information that is provided by an industry, or if you like, by an applicant under a specific regulatory frame. And this information is submitted to EFSA for the assessment. In the next slide, I try to summarize a bit the process, or if you like, the life cycle of an application. That starting from the up to left corner, the applicant or the industry is assuming interested to put on the market a substance or of a product, and the applicant is responsible for a preparation of a dossier, and this dossier needs to comply with a series of requirements in accordance with the applicable regulation, and of course in accordance with the EFSA guidelines for the specific product. The application is then submitted to EFSA thanks to an IT tool. And if it's all complete, this can be assessed by the panel. But first of all, needs to be assigned to a specific panel. As you can imagine, the product or the substance is assigned according to the specificity. So assuming that is a genetically modified plant, this will be assigned to the GMO panel, or if it's a food additive, to the FAF panel. The work of the panel is supported, as already Pietro indicated, also with the support of the working groups. And these are the key players, because they really dig into the details of the information provided by the applicant, but not only. Also the information provided by member states or stakeholders, and of course the information that is available in the literature. So all these data are assessed, and an opinion is drafted by the working group that is submitted to the panel for discussion and the possible adoption. Once adopted, the output is published, and this is then the starting point for the risk managers that will use this information to take a decision on the possible authorization and put in place all the action needed to control the specific hazards. Going a bit more into the details, I will briefly indicate which are the 3 phases relevant during the activity in EFSA. And those are the intake of the application, So the panel is not bothered with this type of task. This is done by other specific unit in EFSA, checking that everything is in compliance and up to standards in terms of quality for starting a straight assessment of the dossier. And it is important to say that in accordance with the applicable regulatory frame, the panel has a limited amount of time to conclude the assessment. And in case the information is not sufficient, the working group or the panels can request the applicant to provide additional data. In case this happens, the clock for the assessment of the information is suspended and restarts only when the information is provided to the panel. And once everything is complete and the opinion is prepared, this is then submitted to the panel as indicated before and published. So just to recap, the key activities of EFSA are to conduct the risk assessment and the risk communication. Risk communication obtained mainly via the channel of the EFSA journal, where all the outputs are published, and the EFSA website. Next slide, please. So again, this is a slide that now is getting familiar for you, and I want to use it to highlight which are the 5 panels dealing with the applications. So going clockwise, there is the GMO panel, the FIDP panel, the FAF, but okay, you are now starting to be quite familiar with those, the food contact material enzymes and processing aids, and the nutrition, novel foods, and the food allergens. You might be curious to know how many applications a panel per year can process. This is not an easy question because this varies a lot depending on the complexity of the product, but also on the specific trends in the market for a product compared to another. So we cannot really give a single number. But if you are afraid that the activity in these panels might be boring because you need to deal a lot with application that might be repetitive, this is not the case because the products are really diverse, even within the same area. So the challenges are always different, and it's really not easy to get bored with applications. And very important to say, this is not the only activity that panels dealing with applications are carrying on. In fact, it's common that substantial time is dedicated also to the development of sectorial guidances. Very important to inform the applicants on the data requirements and the type of data that needs to be provided, as well as to inform the risk assessors on how to evaluate those data. But also those panels can be requested by Commission to provide scientific support, so not different from the previous panel Pietro described. And also, or their own initiative, these panels can produce statements on specific scientific issues. In the next slides, you can see the variability in the type of outputs that can be published by those panels, so are very diverse. And in the next one, next slides, yes, a little bit more of details. So I will not go line by line, but you can see again how variable can be the type of topics, but also again, not only applications are the core business for these panels. Before moving to the questions, I have another slide similar to the previous one, where you can indeed look that in a typical agenda of those panels, there are not only application, and it's quite heterogeneous, the type of topics that can be discussed during each meeting. So if you have time, please have a look. And to conclude, I've just selected a few questions that we thought might be relevant. So the first one, it's quite specific, I would say, and concern an eligibility condition that is in the call, indicating that a candidate that already was involved for more than 10 years in the activity of a panel cannot be elected in the same one. So here a participant was asking if his membership in the ANS panel, that is a former panel, not anymore existing, counts in these 10 years. The answer is that because it's a different entity, even though the FAF panel covers some of the same areas covered by the ANS panel, this does not represent exactly the same entity. So this means that the 10 years does not count in this particular case, and the candidate is eligible for the FAF panel. The second question, it's partially a repetition, but it's very important to stress this point. So can be divided in two parts. So the first part is indicating that the participant is working in the private sector. Again, this is a delicate point. As you know, EFSA is paying a lot of attention to the conflict of interest. So for sure, this will be assessed, the activity in the private sector. And do not repeat what already mentioned by Maria, but this might represent a conflict and needs to be assessed. The participant is also asking which type of outputs can be submitted, because he produces a number of reports. These are the reports are scientific assessments, so these are suitable documents that can be part of the minimum requirements of the publications or scientific assessment produced in the last 5 years. So this can be certainly included in the call. Again, the DOI is an issue that also needs to be considered. The last question, the third one, is related to participants that is working for a national risk assessment body. And indeed, in this case, it is true that the outputs from the national risk bodies might not indicate specifically the authors of a given output. So here the participant is asking what should be provided. In this case, what is suggested is to provide these scientific assessments, indicate which was the role of the candidate in the preparation of the scientific assessment, so which was the contribution. And in case the candidate will be shortlisted and eventually selected, EFSA might request further evidences of the involvement in the preparation of those outputs. So hope this answered the question. And with that, I thank you all for the attention, and I leave the floor back to Frank. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, in particular, the last point is here very relevant. We are looking for experts with really different working experiences, background, as well as the different topics that you presented on the 5 panels dealing with applications. So within EFSA, we are not generating scientific data ourselves, but we use data that are available in the scientific literature or that are brought to us by applicants. But experts are really able to work at the edge of scientific expertise at the forefront and have really an impact with the EFSA outputs in the daily life, I would say, because we are all exposed to food, to feed, and to animal and plant health in our daily life. Let's go with this to the next topic. It's the last topic of today. A bit more explanation on the scientific committee, and this will be provided to you by Daniela Morici. She's a team leader in the methodology and scientific support unit in EFSA. The floor is yours, Daniela.
Thanks, Frank, and good afternoon to the audience. I hope you still have a bit of energy to follow me until the end. It will take just 10 minutes. So I will briefly introduce the scientific committee. If you go to the next slide, you are now familiar with this slide that shows you the 10 EFSA panels, and the scientific committee is in between. So the scientific committee, as Maria has introduced, is composed by the 10 panel chairs, so the chair of the GMO panel, the chair of the animal feed, the chair of the biological hazards, plus 6 independent experts, independent in the sense they do not belong to any of the panels. You have to keep this into consideration when you apply for the scientific committee, because as Maria explained, we select between 11 and 21 members for the different panels, but for the scientific committee we would need to select only 6. So this means that the competition is higher because we have only 6 to be seats available. The other 10 panel chairs are given, are coming from after the panel has elected its own chair. If you go to the next slide, okay, here role and responsibility of the scientific committee. So again, this has been partially introduced to you, but I will repeat myself, maybe explaining a little bit better. So the scientific committee has to ensure the consistency of the scientific opinions procedures, in particular to harmonization of the working methods, which means mainly developing cross-cutting guidance and methodologies for the risk assessment to be used by the different panels. The scientific committee also covers and produces opinions on multisectorial issues falling within the competence of more than one panel, or which do not fall within the competence of any of the scientific panel. And you will see some example in a minute. The scientific committee ensures also the coordination between the different work programs of the scientific panels to avoid the adoption of diverging scientific opinion. This is because, for example, we have substances that are assessed by different panels because under different legal frameworks, food additives and feed additives is a typical example. So we need to make sure that we don't come up with diverging opinions, and this is where the scientific committee plays a major role. The scientific committee is also tasked to identify any possible emerging issues falling in the remit of activity of EFSA, and can provide strategic advice to the executive director upon request. We go to the next slides. Here I have highlighted a little bit more what is the role of the panel chairs in the scientific committee. So the panel chairs have the opportunity to review the progresses made by the working group developing draft opinions on cross-cutting issues, as I said before, or cross-cutting guidances. They keep each other informed about the activities, and they also liaise between them to plan the scientific work. It is also possible for the scientific committee to have a sort of constructive scientific debate. Just to give an example, we have recently organized a workshop for the possible development of a guidance on biomarkers of effects for risk assessment. We've done in the past one workshop on the artificial intelligence, one on the microbiome. So we try to organize at least 1 or twice a year workshop to stimulate a little bit the discussion and be on the forefront for the risk assessment. Again, the role for the panel chairs is to facilitate the working procedures and make sure that in the panel they apply the cross-cutting guidance that have been developed by the scientific committee. And last but not least, ensure fit-for-purpose scientific advice. If you go to the next slides, okay, here are some examples of outputs produced by the scientific committee. Here we have 2 examples, 3 actually, of generic, what we call generic EC mandates for the scientific committee. On the left, we have a scientific opinion that has been published in the beginning of this year. Actually, it's been adopted end of last year, but published in January 2023. on the re-evaluation of existing health-based guidance values for copper and exposure assessment from all sources. And I will take this example in a minute, but just to let you know that we have two EC ongoing mandates. The first one is on the risk to human and animal health from the presence of bromide in food and feed, and the other one is on human health risk assessment of fluoride in food and drinking water, taking into account all sources of exposure. As you can see here, the substances at stake are substances that are relevant for more than one panel. Here the copper example, just to be more explicit. So why copper was assigned to the scientific committee? Because copper is an essential micronutrient that is present naturally in many food, and we can be exposed to copper via organic or conventional pesticides, via feed or food additives, or also can be a nutrient in fortified food and food supplements. Too much or too little copper in a diet can lead to health problems, and this is why the scientific committee has come up with an acceptable daily intake of 0.07 milligram per kilogram body weight for the adult population. For what concerns infants and toddlers, they are exposed to copper via infant formula and follow-on formulas. And the adverse effect from the exposure to copper in children are not expected to be high due to the fact that they need higher nutrient for the growth. So this is in a nutshell what has been done by the scientific committee for the risk assessment of copper. You go to the next one. Here I've listed two outputs that are self-tasks. So you may remember that you've been presented the way EFSA can be tasked, and one of the possibility is that the panel decided to embark in an activity because the panel thinks it is important to clarify or to produce a statement or an opinion on a particular subject. In February 2021, the scientific committee produced a statement on the derivation of health-based guidance values for regulated products that are also nutrients. This is typical the example, for example, of phosphates that are nutrients, but they are also regulated products. So this statement clarifies some aspects important for the risk assessment to be considered. Another topic, also very hot topic, was the opinion on the impact on non-monotonic dose responses on necessary human health risk assessment. This opinion was published in September 2021, and it offers an approach to be applied when non-monotonicity is apparently found during the risk assessment. So these are two examples, and then if we go to the next one, here we have two examples of cross-cutting guidance documents. The first one was published in June, adopted in June 2021, and is the guidance on the risk assessment of nanomaterials to be applied in the food and feed chain. And the other one is a revision of an existing guidance on the benchmark dose approach that was again adopted in September 2022. Going to the next one, these are two examples of ongoing cross-cutting guidance development. The first one is a guidance under development on the protocol. The protocol is used usually to design upfront the way we want to do the risk assessment, and this is particularly important for generic mandates when we do not have a dossier. So in this case, the guidance will be launched for public consultation next week. This is a usual practice for us when we develop a cross-cutting guidance document. In particular, for this guidance, there will be an info session organized on the 28th of March in the afternoon. The registration will close on 24th of March, so if you are interested in this topic, you still have time to register. Another ongoing work for cross-cutting guidance relates to the finalization of this guidance on appraising and integrating evidence from epidemiological studies. This was a first draft produced in 2020 for testing phase, and we are now back working on this guidance to finalize it. And also here, the public consultation will be launched sometime this year with the aim of finalizing probably by the end of the year or beginning of 2024. Okay, here we have a list of published cross-cutting guidance documents. This is a list, not comprehensive, but let's say of the main guidance that have been produced in the last few years. We have, for example, guidance for the risk assessment of substances present in food intended for infants below 16 weeks of age, guidance for the use of weight of evidence on biological relevance, guidance for genotoxicity assessment of mixtures, and also another guidance clarifying some aspects of the genotoxicity assessment. We have guidance on the use of threshold of toxicological concern and guidance on the technical requirement for regulated food and feed products to establish the presence of small particles, including nanoparticles. So this is just to give you an idea what is developed in terms of cross-cutting guidance by the scientific committee. You see that the topics are very different, and these guidance are implemented to all the relevant panels. Okay, so now time for questions. I selected these 3 questions. The first one asks, does EFSA provide training on methodologies used in risk assessment? Yes, we do. We want to make sure that our cross-cutting guidance are used and are used correctly. So we propose training on risk assessment methodologies. The experts that selected to be in the panel are not forced or obliged to follow these trainings, but of course it is also important for them to better understand what is the content of the cross-cutting guidance document. Therefore, this is an opportunity for them to be aware. The second question is how many meetings per year are envisaged for the scientific committee? You have seen before that overall the number is different, could be quite different according to the panels. For the scientific committee, usually are 5 to 6 meetings per year, lasting 1.5 or 2 days. So this is at least it has been like this so far. It might be that in the future things will change. We may have 1 or 2 meetings more, but overall I would say that 6 is the maximum number for a year of meetings. The last question is, does the scientific committee also include non-researchers? Sorry. Here I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I guess the question is, do we consider applications sent by scientists that are not working at university on producing active research? And the answer is yes. I think Andrea has partially explained you what we mean here. We have among the eligibility criteria the active scientific production that can be done by scientific publications in peer-reviewed international journals, or can also be done via scientific approved, via scientific assessment at national, international level. So, for example, people working in competent authorities producing a risk assessment for competent authorities can be applied and will be considered for the purpose of entering into our scientific committee, scientific panels. And with this, I've closed my presentation. Give back the floor to Frank.
Thank you, Daniela, for clearly explaining the role of the scientific committee. It's the overarching scientific body that we have in EFSA, so its work is really of high importance to ensure that we have harmonized approaches among the different panels. With this, we come to the end of the webinar. I would like to thank all the colleagues for the presentations done today. I hope this was really interesting for you as participants. I would like to close with a few remarks. So as said in the beginning, the recording will be available in a couple of days on EFSA's website, and you will get also an evaluation survey. So please take a few minutes to provide the feedback to us, and we will use this as input for future events and see how we can improve our service to you. If your question was not addressed during the presentation or in the selected questions that we answered, please contact us with any question you might further have on the email address that is indicated here on the slides. So I would like to conclude and say, if you really want to make a difference for food safety, but also for feed, animal health and plant health, it is really the opportunity now to apply, to work with us, because the next opportunity will only come in 5 years. So we are really looking forward to look at your application later on, and then you will hear anyway of the outcome of this assessment of your submission of your interests. The deadline for application is the 3rd of September, at the 3rd of April, I'm sorry. But as said in the beginning, please don't wait until the last day to start working on your application. Good, with this we close for today. We hope it was relevant, and also share the word, spread the word with any interested colleagues that you might have, and refer them to the EFSA website and the recording that will be available. Thank you for your participation this afternoon. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.